The gavel came down, and the sound of it was the only thing that kept me from screaming that I had won. Every share, every asset, every single piece of Empire Holdings was mine. The board had crumbled. Marcus had been dragged out of his own office by security while Chloe watched, her perfect red mouth hanging open like she'd just been slapped. But she hadn't been slapped. Not yet. That came later, in the corridor outside the courtroom, when Marcus's arm shot out and his hand connected with her cheek so hard that her head snapped to the side. The crack of it echoed off the marble walls, and I felt it in my own jaw, a phantom sting that traveled all the way down my spine. "Don't you ever," Marcus started, his voice a ragged snarl, but I cut him off. "Don't," I said, and my voice was so flat, so empty, that even he stopped. "Don't pretend you're defending my honor now. Not after everything." Chloe's hand flew to her face, her eyes wide with shock and something that looked suspiciously like dawning horror. She stared at Marcus, then at me, and I watched the realization hit her like a freight train. He'd never loved her. He'd never loved anyone. He'd just used her the way he'd used me, and now that she was no longer useful, she was disposable. "Get away from me," Chloe whispered, her voice trembling. She backed away from Marcus, her heels clicking unevenly on the polished floor. "Don't touch me. Don't ever touch me again." Marcus lunged for her, his face twisted with rage, but I stepped between them. I wasn't protecting her. I was protecting myself. Because if he hit her again, if he did anything else that could be used against him, I wanted to see it with my own eyes. "You're finished," I said, my voice low and steady. "Both of you. The board has already voted. The shares are mine. The contracts are mine. And this," I pulled a slim folder from my briefcase and held it up. "This is the evidence of your embezzlement. Every offshore account, every false invoice, every single lie you told to hide what you were doing." Marcus's face went pale. "You can't prove any of that." "I don't have to prove it," I said, and I smiled. "I just have to show it to the DA." The smile on his face collapsed into something I'd never seen before. Fear. Not the kind of fear that comes from losing a business deal, but the kind that comes from losing everything. Freedom. Reputation. The life he'd built on the bones of my trust. I walked away, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the polished floor. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. I could feel their eyes on my back, burning with hatred and betrayal, and it tasted sweeter than any victory I'd ever imagined. But the sweetness didn't last. The call came 3 hours later, while I was standing in the penthouse, staring at the city skyline and wondering what the hell I was supposed to do next. The phone buzzed in my hand, and I answered without checking the caller ID. "Elena." It was David, my attorney, and his voice was tight with something that made my stomach clench. "There's a problem." "What kind of problem?" "Marcus is dead." The words didn't make sense at first. I heard them, processed them, but they felt like they belonged to someone else's story. A movie, a bad dream, anything but my reality. "What do you mean he's dead?" I asked, and my voice sounded like it was coming from very far away. "He was in a car accident on the way to the airport. High-speed collision. They think he was trying to flee the country." David paused, and I could hear him take a shaky breath. "Chloe was with him. She's in the hospital. Critical condition." I sat down heavily on the couch, the phone slipping in my sweaty palm. The glass of champagne I'd been holding shattered on the floor, but I barely noticed. All I could think about was the sound of the gavel, the crack of Marcus's hand against Chloe's face, the way he'd lunged for her in the corridor. It should have been satisfying. It should have felt like justice. Instead, all I felt was the cold hand of something darker closing around my throat. "Elena," David's voice cut through the fog. "Are you okay?" "No," I said, and the word came out like a sob. "I'm not okay. I'm never going to be okay." But I didn't cry. I couldn't. The tears were there, locked behind a wall of shock and disbelief, but they wouldn't come. So I just sat there, staring at the broken glass on the floor, and listened to David's voice fade in and out as he talked about legal proceedings and media statements and all the things that were supposed to matter. None of it mattered. The only thing that mattered was the truth I couldn't escape. Marcus was dead, and I was the last person who'd seen him alive. The police came the next morning, Two detectives with tired eyes and hard faces. They sat across from me in the penthouse, drinking coffee I'd poured with trembling hands, and asked me questions I didn't have answers to. "You were seen arguing with your husband in the courtroom corridor," the first detective said, flipping through his notebook. Several witnesses reported that the argument was heated, that there was physical contact. "He hit her," I said, my voice steady despite the churning in my gut. "He hit Chloe." I stepped in to stop him. The second detective leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "And then what happened?" I walked away. I didn't see them again until David called me to tell me they were dead. The detective nodded, jotting down notes, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. The suspicion. It was written all over her face, clear as the accusation she was too professional to voice. They thought I had something to do with it. They thought I'd set the whole thing up. And the worst part of me wished I had. Because the alternative was that I was just a bystander, a victim of circumstances I couldn't control. And I had spent too long being a victim to accept that label. Now they left after an hour, taking my laptop and my phone and the folder of evidence I'd shown Marcus. They said they were just following protocol. But I knew better. They were building a case. A case against me. The days that followed were a blur of media speculation and legal maneuvering. Every news channel ran the story, their anchors speculating about the jilted wife and the mysterious circumstances surrounding Marcus's death. The online comments were worse, filled with anonymous voices calling me a murderer and worse. I retreated into the penthouse, answering only David's calls and ignoring the rest. I stopped eating, stopped sleeping. I just sat in the dark, staring at the city skyline, and tried to piece together what had happened. The answer came in the form of a text, 3 days after Marcus's funeral. Asterisk, "You think you've won. But you have no idea what I'm capable of." Asterisk, the number was blocked, but I didn't need to see it to know who'd sent it. Chloe was alive. And she was coming for me. The hospital was cold, sterile, and smelled faintly of antiseptic. I walked through the corridors like a ghost, my heels echoing off the linoleum floors, until I reached the room at the end of the hall. Chloe was in the bed, her face bandaged, her arm in a cast, but her eyes were open and sharp as daggers. "You," she said, the word a rasping whisper. "I should have known you'd come." I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, crossing my arms. "You texted me." I couldn't let that go unanswered. She laughed, a bitter, broken sound that turned into a coughing fit. When she finally caught her breath, her eyes were wet with tears that could have been real or fake. "I didn't care either way. Marcus is dead," she said. "He was trying to leave me. Did you know that he was going to take the money and disappear, leave me to take the fall for everything?" I didn't answer. I just watched her, waiting for the truth to slip through the cracks of her performance. "You're not sorry," I said finally. "You're not sorry for any of it. You're just sorry you got caught." Chloe's smile was a slash of white in her damaged face. "You're right. I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry for taking your husband. I'm not sorry for taking your money. I'm not sorry for any of it. Because you were never going to win, Elena. You were just too blind to see it." "I already won," I said. "I have Empire Holdings. I have everything you and Marcus tried to take from me." Chloe's smile widened. "That's what you think. You think this is over. You think I'm just going to disappear." The door behind me burst open, and I spun around to find a nurse standing there, her face pale with alarm. "Miss Sterling," she said, her voice shaking. "You need to come with me." "Why?" "Because there's a man here.
He's asking for you."
He says he has information about the accident." The man in question was sitting in the hospital waiting room, his posture rigid and his face unreadable. He stood as I approached, holding out a business card that gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights. "Miss Sterling," he said, his voice smooth and controlled. "My name is Daniel Russo. I'm a private investigator, and I've been hired to find out what really happened to your husband." My blood ran cold. Hired by whom? Daniel smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made my skin crawl. "By someone who wants you to have the truth. Someone who's been watching you for a very long time." He handed me a photograph, and I looked down at it with a sense of dread that coiled in my stomach like a snake. The image was grainy, taken from a distance, but it was unmistakable. It was Chloe, in a hospital bed, talking to a man whose face I couldn't quite make out. A man who looked a lot like Marcus. I don't understand, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Marcus is dead. I saw the body. Daniel's smile widened. Did you just see what they wanted you to see? The room tilted around me, and I reached out to steady myself against the wall. The photograph crinkled in my hand, the edges sharp and cold against my fingers. I think, Daniel said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, that you and I need to have a very long conversation about what really happened on the night of the accident. And in that moment, standing in the fluorescent glare of the hospital waiting room, with the smell of antiseptic and fear all around me, I realized the truth. This wasn't over. It was never going to be over. Marcus was dead. Chloe was alive. And somewhere out there, someone was pulling the strings to someone who wanted me to suffer. The photograph slipped from my fingers and fluttered to the floor, landing face up, so that I could see the man's face clearly for the first time. It was Marcus, but not the Marcus I'd known. This Marcus had a cruel, knowing smile that didn't belong on the face of a dead man. And he was holding a gun. The gavel cracked down, and for one perfect, crystalline moment, the only sound in the entire courtroom was the echo of my victory. I had done it. Empire Holdings was mine. Every share, every contract, every asset that Marcus and his little snake of an assistant had tried to steal from me was now legally, irrevocably mine. The board had folded like a house of cards the moment I'd produced the evidence of Marcus's embezzlement, his forged financials, his deliberate attempt to have me declared mentally incompetent so he could walk away with everything. I rose from my seat at the plaintiff's table, smoothing the front of my cream-colored sheath dress. The same dress I'd been wearing when I walked into his office 3 months ago and found Chloe perched on his lap, her manicured fingers tangled in his tie, her lips red and wet and triumphant. She wasn't triumphant now. I turned slowly, deliberately, and let my gaze sweep across the gallery. The reporters, their phones already out, their thumbs flying across screens. The board members, their faces pale and sweating. And there, in the third row, Marcus and Chloe, huddled together like two rats who'd just realized the ship was sinking. Marcus's jaw was so tight I could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. His expensive suit, the one I'd picked out for him on our 10th anniversary, was rumpled and stained with sweat. He looked like a man who'd just watched his entire world collapse, which was exactly what had happened. Chloe was worse. Her designer heels were scuffed, her perfect blowout had gone flat, and her face had taken on a greenish pallor that made her look like she was about to be sick. She clutched Marcus's arm so hard her knuckles went white, but he didn't even seem to notice. His eyes were fixed on me, burning with a hatred so pure it almost made me smile. "Congratulations, Miss Sterling." The judge's voice cut through the murmuring crowd, and I turned back to face him. He was an older man, silver-haired and weathered, with eyes that had seen too many divorces and corporate battles to be impressed by anything. But there was a glint of something in them now. Respect, maybe. Or relief that the case was finally over. "The court recognizes your acquisition of Empire Holdings in its entirety. All claims filed by the defendant are hereby dismissed with prejudice." "Thank you, Your Honor," I said, and my voice was steady.
"Come."
The voice of someone who'd already won. Did I gather my files, slipped them into my briefcase, and walked out of the courtroom. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. The silence behind me was louder than any applause. David caught up with me in the corridor, his face split in a grin that made him look 20 years younger. "Elena, that was incredible. I've never seen anything like it. The way you handled the cross-examination. Save it for the press conference," I said, but I couldn't help the small smile that tugged at my lips. "We're not done yet." "What do you mean?" the judge ruled. "It's over." I stopped walking and turned to face him. "It's not over until Marcus and Chloe know exactly what they lost. Every single thing they tried to take from me. I want them to feel it, David. I want them to choke on it." David's grin faded, replaced by something more cautious. "Elena, I understand the anger. I really do. But revenge isn't going to fix what happened. It's not going to undo the affair or the betrayal or... I don't want to undo it. I cut him off. I want to make sure they never forget it. I left him standing in the corridor and walked toward the exit, my heels echoing off the marble floors. The sunlight was blinding when I stepped outside, and for a moment, I just stood there, letting it wash over me. I felt lighter than I had in years, as if the weight of Marcus's lies and Chloe's schemes had finally been lifted from my shoulders. But the lightness didn't last. I was halfway down the courthouse steps when I heard footsteps behind me. Fast, frantic footsteps, the kind that meant someone was running. I turned, and my heart lurched in my chest. Chloe was coming toward me, her face twisted with rage, her eyes wild and wet. She had a folder clutched to her chest, the same folder I'd seen her carrying into the courtroom that morning. The one that was supposed to contain the evidence of my mental incompetence. "You think you've won," she spat, her voice shrill and trembling. "You think you've taken everything from me." "I took back what was mine," I said, my voice cold. "You and Marcus tried to steal my company, my reputation, my life. You don't get to play the victim here, Chloe." She laughed, a harsh, jagged sound that cut through the air like broken glass. "You don't understand anything. You never did. Marcus never loved you. He was planning to leave you long before I came along. I was just the final push." "I don't care," I said, and I meant it. "He's your problem now. Enjoy him." Chloe's face contorted with fury, and she lunged at me, her hands outstretched, the folder falling to the ground and spilling its contents across the steps. Papers scattered everywhere, but I didn't look at them. I was too focused on her, on the wild, desperate look in her eyes. "Stop," I said, stepping back. "Don't do something you'll regret." "Regret?" she shrieked. "I regret the day I ever met Marcus. I regret the day I ever laid eyes on you. You ruined everything. Everything." Her voice cracked on the last word, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the months of humiliation, the lies, the way she'd looked at me with that smug, triumphant smile while she was sleeping in my bed and wearing my grandmother's pearls, that I had no sympathy left for her. "Get off me," I said, pushing her away. She stumbled back, her heels skidding on the loose papers, and for a moment, I thought she was going to fall. But she caught herself, her chest heaving, her eyes still blazing with hatred. "This isn't over," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You might have won today, but you haven't won the war." She turned and fled, her heels clicking unevenly as she ran back up the courthouse steps. I watched her go, my heart pounding in my chest, and I felt something cold settle in my stomach. She wasn't done. I knew that as surely as I knew my own name. I bent down and picked up one of the papers that had scattered across the steps. It was a photograph, grainy and blurred, taken from a distance. It showed Marcus in a hotel lobby, his arm around a woman who wasn't Chloe. She was young, blonde, and laughing at something he'd said. My blood went cold. I gathered up the rest of the papers, shoving them into my briefcase without looking at them. I didn't want to know what else was in there. I didn't want to see any more evidence of Marcus's betrayals. I'd already seen enough to last a lifetime. But the image stayed with me, burned into my mind like a brand. The woman in the photograph. The way Marcus had looked at her. The way he'd never looked at me. I went back to the penthouse, the same penthouse I'd shared with Marcus for the past 5 years, and I poured myself a glass of champagne. I sat on the white leather couch and stared out at the city skyline, trying to make sense of the chaos in my head. I'd won. I'd won everything. So why did I feel so empty? The answer came in the form of a text message sent from a number I didn't recognize. Asterisk, you think you've taken everything from me, but I have something you'll never have. Something that's going to destroy you. Asterisk, I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. It was Chloe. It had to be. She'd found a way to get to me, even from the ashes of her defeat. I didn't reply. I just deleted the message and blocked the number. I wasn't going to let her get under my skin. Not again. Not ever. But the words stayed with me, echoing in my mind long after I'd finished my champagne and stumbled to bed. Something that's going to destroy you. What could she possibly have that could destroy me? I had the company. I had the money. I had the victory. What else could there be? I found out the next morning when I woke up to a knock on the door. I padded across the marble floor in my silk robe, my head still foggy from the champagne and the sleepless night, and I opened it to find a process server standing there, holding a thick envelope. "Miss Sterling," he said, his voice bland and professional. "You've been served." I took the envelope, my hands trembling, and I opened it right there in the doorway. The legal document inside was brief, cold, and devastating. It was a paternity suit. Marcus had filed it just days before the trial, naming me as the respondent. According to the document, he was claiming that the child he'd fathered with Chloe was entitled to a share of my assets. My assets. The ones I'd just won in court, the woman in the photograph. The blonde in the hotel lobby. It hadn't been an affair. It had been a setup. Marcus had gotten Chloe pregnant, and now he was using their child to take everything from me. I dropped the envelope on the floor, my hands shaking too hard to hold it. The process server was already gone, disappearing into the elevator like a ghost. I stood in the doorway of my penthouse. The city sprawled beneath me, and I felt the foundation of my victory crumble around me. Marcus wasn't just a liar. He wasn't just a cheat. He was a strategist. He'd been planning this for months, maybe years, and he'd used Chloe as a pawn in a game I hadn't even known I was playing, and now I had a choice. I could walk away, let him take what he wanted, and pretend the last 3 months had never happened. Or I could fight back. I looked at the legal document at Marcus's signature at the bottom, and I made my decision. I wasn't going to let him win. I'd built Empire Holdings from nothing, poured my blood and sweat and tears into making it the success it was today. I wasn't going to let a man who'd betrayed me in the worst possible way take it all away. I picked up the envelope and walked to my office, my heart pounding with a fury I hadn't felt in years. I dialed David's number with shaking fingers, and when he answered, I didn't bother with pleasantries. "I need you to find out everything there is to know about Chloe's pregnancy," I said. The date of conception, the hospital records, everything. David was silent for a moment. "Elena, what's going on?" "Marcus is trying to take my company. He's using his child with Chloe as leverage. And I'm not going to let him." Another silence, longer this time. "Elena, if he is a child, and if that child is legally his, there might not be anything we can do. The courts take paternity claims very seriously." "I know." I cut him off. "That's why I need you to find out everything. I need to know if this child is really his, or if it's just another lie." David sighed, and I could hear the doubt in his voice. "I'll do what I can. But, Elena, you need to prepare yourself. This might not end the way you want it to." "I know," I said, and I hung up the phone and I sat in my office, the legal documents spread out in front of me, and I felt the weight of everything pressing down on me. The victory, the betrayal, the realization that Marcus had been playing a long game I hadn't even seen coming. But I wasn't going to give up. I wasn't going to let him win. I was going to fight. And I was going to win. No matter what it took. The phone rang again, and I answered without looking at the caller ID. "Hello, Elena." It was Chloe's voice, soft and smug and dripping with satisfaction. "I hear you got my gift." I clenched my jaw so hard it ached. "You're not going to get away with this." "Oh, but I already have." She laughed, a low, throaty sound that made my skin crawl. "You might have won the company, Elena. But I have something you'll never have. A family, a future. And you have nothing. Nothing but a hollow victory and an empty bed." I didn't answer. I couldn't. The words had lodged in my throat like stones. "Enjoy your win," Chloe said. "It's the last one you'll ever have." The line went dead and I stared at the phone in my hand, my whole body trembling with rage and grief, and something I couldn't quite name. And then I threw it against the wall, watching it shatter into 100 pieces. I was not going to let her win. I was going to fight back. I was going to take everything from her, the same way she'd tried to take everything from me. And I was going to start by finding out the truth about that child. The private investigator's office smelled like stale coffee and old paper, the kind of place where secrets went to die. I sat across from Daniel Russo, his business card still burning a hole in my pocket, and watched him spread photographs across his cluttered desk like a dealer, laying out a losing hand. "Your husband wasn't in that car," he said, tapping one of the images with a nicotine-stained finger. The body they pulled from the wreckage, that was a John Doe from the morgue. Dental records were faked. Fingerprints were forged. The whole thing was a setup. I stared at the photograph. It showed Marcus in a crowded airport terminal, his face partially obscured by a baseball cap and sunglasses, but unmistakably him. He was carrying a duffel bag and checking his watch, the picture of casual urgency. "He's alive," I breathed. The words felt foreign in my mouth, like a language I didn't speak. Very much alive. And very much on the run. Daniel leaned back in his chair, the springs creaking in protest. "The question is, who helped him disappear and why?" My mind raced back to the hospital, to Chloe's bruised face and venomous smile. She'd known. Of course she'd known. The whole thing had been a performance, a carefully orchestrated act to throw me off balance, while Marcus slipped away to wherever he was going. "Chloe," I said. "She wasn't on it. She has to be." Daniel shook his head. "I don't think so. She was genuinely injured in that crash. Broken arm, cracked ribs, the works. If she wasn't on it, she wouldn't have let herself get hurt like that. Unless it was the only way to sell the lie." He considered that, his eyes narrowing. "You really think she's capable of that level of self-destruction? She slept with my husband, tried to steal my company, and then got into a car with him while he was faking his own death. I think she's capable of anything." Daniel nodded slowly, pulling another photograph from the pile. This one was more recent, taken just days ago. It showed Marcus in a small coastal town, standing outside a diner with a woman who wasn't Chloe. She was blonde, athletic, and laughing at something he'd said. "Is that the same woman from the hotel lobby?" I asked, leaning forward. "No. This one's new. Different hair, different face. He's been moving around a lot, keeping his head down. But he's getting sloppy. He stayed in that town for 3 days, long enough for my contact to get a clear shot." I studied the photograph, my stomach churning. He looked happy, relaxed, like he didn't have a care in the world. Like he hadn't left behind a trail of destruction that had nearly destroyed me. "He's got a plan," I said slowly, the pieces clicking into place. "He's not just running. He's building something. A new life. A new identity. Maybe even a new company." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You think he's starting over?" "I think he's been planning this for longer than I want to admit. The embezzlement. The fake pregnancy. The staged death. It's all connected. He's been building an escape hatch for years, and I was so focused on the affair that I didn't see it." I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the worn carpet. "I need to find him before he disappears for good. If he gets out of the country, I'll never be able to bring him to justice." "Justice," Daniel's voice was skeptical. "Or revenge. Both," I said flatly. "They're the same thing now." He didn't argue. He just handed me a folder thick with documents and photographs. "Everything I've got is in there. His last known location, his aliases, his financial trail. It's not much, but it's a start." I took the folder and slipped it into my bag. "How much do I owe you?" "Consider it a down payment on the story of the decade. If I help you catch your husband, I'm going to be the one who breaks it to the press." "Fair," I nodded, shaking his hand. "Fair." I was halfway out the door when he called after me. "Anna, be careful. This man faked his own death to get away from you. He's desperate, and desperate people do dangerous things." I paused, my hand on the doorframe. So am I. The drive back to the city was a blur of neon lights and anxious thoughts. I replayed every conversation, every fight, every moment of silence that had stretched between us in the months before everything fell apart. Marcus had been planning this for so long, and I'd been too blind to see it. I thought about the early days, when we were young and hungry and so full of ambition that we could barely contain it. We'd built Empire Holdings together, side by side, staying up late to review contracts and waking up early to make phone calls to clients across the globe. He'd been my partner, my confidant, my best friend out, and then something had shifted. Slowly at first, almost imperceptibly, like a crack in a foundation. He'd started working later, coming home earlier, spending weekends in his office instead of with me. I told myself it was the stress of the business, the pressure of the market, the natural ebb and flow of a long marriage. I'd been wrong. He hadn't been stressed. He'd been preparing. Stockpiling resources, building alliances, laying the groundwork for his escape. And I'd been the last to know. I pulled into the garage of the penthouse and sat in the car for a long moment, staring at the concrete wall in front of me. The folder from Daniel was on the passenger seat, thick with secrets that felt heavier than they should. I reached for it, intending to take it upstairs and start combing through the evidence, but my hands were shaking too much to grip it properly. I couldn't do this alone. I needed help. Real help. The kind of help that came with legal authority and institutional backing. I called David on my way up to the penthouse, filling him in on everything Daniel had told me. He was silent for a long time after I finished, the kind of silence that made my stomach knot with anxiety. Elena, if what you're saying is true, then Marcus has committed multiple felonies. Faking his own death, embezzlement, fraud. We can go to the authorities with this. We can get a warrant. I don't want to go to the authorities, I said, stepping into the elevator. I want to find him first. I want to look him in the eye and see his face when he realizes he's been caught. Elena, I know what you're going to say. That it's dangerous. That I'm putting myself at risk. But I don't care. I've spent the last 3 months being a victim, David. I'm done with that. I want to be the one in control for once. The elevator doors opened onto the penthouse, and I stepped into the darkened living room. The city skyline glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, beautiful and indifferent to the chaos unfolding in my life. I'll be careful, I said, more to myself than to him. I'll keep you updated, but I need to do this my way. He sighed, and I could hear the resignation in his voice. Just promise me you won't do anything reckless. If Marcus is as dangerous as you think he is, you need to be smart about this. I'm always smart, I said, and I hung up before he could argue. The penthouse felt different now, emptier and colder than it had before. I'd spent weeks avoiding it, staying in hotels and with friends, but I'd finally come back to face the ghost of my former life. Now it felt like a tomb. I poured myself a glass of water and sat down on the couch, the folder from Daniel spread out in front of me. I started with the financial trail, sifting through bank statements and wire transfers that Marcus had tried to hide behind shell companies and offshore accounts. He'd been clever about it, but not clever enough. There were gaps in the records, inconsistencies that pointed to a pattern of systematic theft. And then I found it. A transfer to a Cayman Islands account, made just days before the supposed accident. The amount was large enough to fund a new life, a comfortable one, far away from the wreckage he'd left behind. I stared at the number, my mind reeling. This wasn't just an escape. It was a middle finger, a final insult to everything I'd built and everything he'd stolen. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number Daniel had given me. The one he said was a direct line to his best contact in the Caribbean. Hello, a woman's voice answered, husky and accented. This is Elena Sterling. Daniel Russo gave me your number. I need information about a transfer made to a Cayman account 6 weeks ago. There was a pause on the other end. I can help you, but it'll cost you. Name your price. Another pause, longer this time. $20,000. Up front. I'll have the information within 48 hours.
I didn't hesitate. Done.
I'll wire it to you tonight. I hung up and leaned back against the couch, my heart pounding with a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. I was doing it. I was finally taking control. The phone buzzed in my hand, and I looked down to see a text from an unknown number. Asterisk, you're getting warmer. But you're not there yet. Asterisk, I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. It had to be Marcus. No one else would have known what I was doing. He was watching me. He'd always been watching me. My hands trembled as I typed out a response. Who is this? The reply came instantly. Asterisk, you know who I am. And you know what I want. Asterisk, tell me. Asterisk, the phone buzzed one last time. Asterisk, I want you to stop looking. Or I'll make you regret it. Asterisk, I didn't respond. I couldn't. The words had knocked the air out of my lungs, leaving me gasping and reeling. Marcus was alive. He was watching me. And he was threatening me, but I wasn't going to stop. I couldn't stop. Not now. Not when I was so close. I grabbed the folder and stood up, my resolve hardening with every step. I was going to find him. I was going to bring him down. And I was going to make sure He never hurt anyone again. The phone buzzed again, and I looked down to see a photograph. It was me, standing in the parking garage of the private investigator's office, my face visible and vulnerable. I'm closer than you think. The caption read. And I'm not going anywhere. I dropped the phone like it had burned me, my heart slamming against my ribs. He was here.
He was in the city.
He was everywhere and nowhere, a ghost haunting the edges of my vision. I grabbed my keys and ran for the door. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay there. Not with him watching. Not with him waiting. The elevator door slid open, and I stepped inside, my hands still shaking. I pressed the button for the lobby, and the door slid closed. And then, just before they shut completely, I saw it. A shadow in the hallway, just outside my door. It was still for a moment. Then it moved, disappearing around the corner, like it had never been there. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, frozen, my heart pounding in my ears. He was here. He was in my building. And he wanted me to know it. The elevator began its descent, and I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. I had to think. I had to stay calm. I had to figure out my next move. But all I could think about was his face, cold and calculating, and the smirk that had played on his lips when he'd walked out of the courtroom for the last time. He wasn't done with me. And I wasn't done with him. The elevator doors slid open onto the lobby, and I stumbled out like a woman fleeing a fire. My heels skidded on the polished marble, and I caught myself against the concierge desk, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Miss Sterling, the concierge, a young man named Carlos with kind eyes and a steady presence, was on his feet in an instant. Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost. I opened my mouth to tell him everything, to warn him about the shadow in the hallway, about the text messages, about Marcus. But the words wouldn't come. They were stuck somewhere in my throat, tangled up with the fear that had taken root in my chest. I need to leave. I managed finally. I need to get out of this building. Carlos didn't question me. He just nodded and reached for the phone. I'll call you a car. Where are you going? I don't know. Just somewhere safe. He made the call, his movements quick and efficient, and within minutes, a black sedan was pulling up to the curb. I climbed into the back seat, my hands still trembling, and gave the driver the address of David's office. It was the only place I could think of, the only place where I felt like I could breathe. The city blurred past as we drove, a smear of neon and headlights that did nothing to calm my racing heart. I kept checking my phone, waiting for another message, another photograph, another sign that Marcus was still watching me. But the phone stayed silent. David was waiting for me when I arrived, his face drawn with worry. He led me into his office and closed the door, then handed me a glass of whiskey that I didn't want but drank anyway. Start from the beginning, he said, settling into the chair across from me. Tell me everything. I did. I told him about the private investigator, about the photographs, about the text messages and the shadow in the hallway. I told him about the Cayman Islands account and the blonde in the diner and the overwhelming sense that Marcus was playing a game I didn't fully understand. When I finished, David was silent for a long time. He stared at the wall behind my head, his fingers steepled in front of his face, and I could see the gears turning in his mind. This changes things, he said finally. If Marcus is alive and in the city, then he's not just on the run. He's actively engaged in a campaign of intimidation. That's a crime. A serious one. I know, I said. But I don't want to go to the police.
Not yet.
I need to find him first. I need to confront him myself.
Elena.
I know what you're going to say. That it's reckless. That it's dangerous. But I've been living in fear for months, David. I've been hiding from him, from Chloe, from everything they did to me. And I'm tired of it. I want to fight back. David leaned forward, his eyes searching mine. And what happens when you find him? What then? Do you think a confrontation is going to give you closure? Do you think it's going to undo any of the pain he caused? No, I said, and my voice was steady. But it's going to give me back my power. And that's worth more than any legal victory. He studied me for a long moment, and then he nodded.
All right.
But you're not doing this alone. I'm coming with you. You can't. If Marcus sees you, he'll know I'm onto him. He'll disappear again. Then I'll stay out of sight. But I'm not letting you walk into this by yourself. You need backup, Elena. You need someone who has your back. I wanted to argue, but I knew he was right. I was out of my depth, and I needed help. Real help. Fine, I said. But you do what I say.
When I say it, no arguments.
He raised his hands in surrender.
Deal.
We spent the next hour poring over the evidence Daniel had given me, cross-referencing the financial records and the photographs to pinpoint Marcus's location. The trail led to a small coastal town called Havenport, about 2 hours north of the city. It was the kind of place where people went to disappear, with its quiet streets and sleepy waterfront and a population that minded its own business. I'll make some calls, David said, pulling out his phone. I know a retired detective who lives up there. He might be able to help us. Don't call anyone.
Not yet.
I want to scope the place out first, get a sense of the lay of the land. If Marcus is there, he'll have eyes everywhere. We need to be careful. David nodded, but I could see the worry in his eyes. He didn't like this. He thought I was being reckless, impulsive, driven by emotion rather than logic. And maybe I was. But I didn't care. I was done playing it safe. The drive to Havenport was long and quiet, the highway stretching out before us like an endless ribbon of asphalt. I watched the city recede in the rearview mirror, replaced by rolling hills and dense forests and the occasional glimpse of the ocean. David tried to make conversation, filling the silence with stories about his grandchildren and his plans for retirement. But I wasn't really listening. My mind was elsewhere, caught up in the past and the future and all the moments in between that I thought about Marcus, about the man I'd married and the man he'd become. I thought about the early years, when we were young and in love and so full of promise. I thought about the night we'd founded Empire Holdings, staying up until dawn to write the business plan on a napkin in a diner on the Lower East Side. He'd been so full of hope then, so eager to build something that would last. And I'd believed in him. I'd believed in us, but somewhere along the way, the hope had curdled into ambition, and the ambition had curdled into greed. He'd stopped seeing me as a partner and started seeing me as an obstacle, something to be removed, discarded, forgotten. I'd been so blind.
So trusting.
So desperate to hold on to a marriage that was already dead. What are you thinking about? David asked, his voice pulling me back to the present. I'm thinking about how stupid I was, I said, my voice flat. How I let him manipulate me for so long without seeing it. You weren't stupid, Elena. You were in love. There's a difference. Not to me. Not anymore. We drove in silence for a while, and I watched the landscape change around us. The hills gave way to flat, open fields, and the fields gave way to the salt marshes and sandy beaches of the coast. And then, just as the sun was beginning to set, we reached Havenport. The town was small and quaint, with a main street lined with antique shops and seafood restaurants. The harbor was dotted with fishing boats and pleasure craft, their masts swaying gently in the evening breeze. It looked like the kind of place where nothing bad ever happened. But I knew better. I knew that darkness lurked beneath the surface of every pretty picture. David pulled into a small motel on the outskirts of town, its neon sign flickering in the fading light. We checked in under fake names, paying in cash to avoid leaving a trail. The room was small and Spartan, with a view of the parking lot and a bed that sagged in the middle. This is going to be interesting, David muttered, surveying the accommodations. Think of it as an adventure. He snorted. Adventure.
Right.
That's one word for it.
I didn't sleep that night.
I lay in the lumpy bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the town settling into darkness. Somewhere out there, Marcus was nearby. I could feel it, a prickle at the back of my neck, a flutter in my chest. The next morning I woke before dawn and slipped out of the motel while David was still sleeping. I walked through the quiet streets, my footsteps echoing off the cobblestones, and I made my way to the harbor. The water was calm and gray, reflecting the pale light of the early morning sky. I stood at the end of the pier, breathing in the salt air, and I let myself feel the weight of everything I'd been carrying. And then I saw him. He was sitting on a bench near the water, a cup of coffee in his hand, his face turned toward the rising sun. He looked older than I remembered, his hair streaked with gray, his face lined with worry. But it was him. It was unmistakably him. I walked toward him, my heart pounding in my ears, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. He heard my footsteps and turned, and for a moment, we just stared at each other. "Elena," he said, and his voice was hoarse, like he'd been crying. "I was wondering when you'd find me. Did you think I wouldn't?" My voice was cold, controlled. The voice of someone who'd been hurt too many times to show vulnerability. He shook his head.
No.
"I knew you would. You always were too stubborn to give up." "Where's she?" I asked, my eyes scanning the waterfront. "Chloe, or the new one, the blonde?" He winced, and for a moment, he almost looked ashamed. "There's no new one. That was just a decoy, someone I paid to make it look like I was moving on. I needed to throw you off the trail." Why did you do all of this? The affair, the embezzlement, the fake death. Why couldn't you just leave me?" He set down his coffee and stood, his eyes meeting mine with a desperate intensity. "Because I couldn't face you. Because I was a coward. Because I'd rather pretend to be dead than admit what I'd done." I laughed, a bitter, broken sound that echoed off the water. "You were a coward. You were a coward. You couldn't even divorce me properly. You had to destroy me first." "I know," he said, and his voice cracked. "I know what I did, and I know I can never make it right. But I'm asking you to give me a chance. To let me explain." "Explain what?" "Explain how you slept with my assistant, how you stole from our company, how you tried to have me declared incompetent." "There's no explanation for that, Marcus. There's just the truth." His face crumpled, and for a moment, he looked like the man I'd married, the man I'd loved. But the sight of him, broken and begging, only made me angrier. "You don't get to do this," I said, my voice rising. "You don't get to show up and expect forgiveness. You don't get to pretend you're the victim. You did this. You did all of it." "I know," he said again, and he reached out to take my hand. "I know, and I'm sorry. But I can explain. I can." I jerked my hand away.
No.
"I'm done listening. I'm done being your audience. You're going to pay for what you did, Marcus. All of it." I turned and walked away, my heels clicking on the cobblestones. He called after me, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. Because if I stopped, if I looked back, I might forget why I was there, that I might forget that I was finally in control. The harbor wind cut through my coat like a blade, but I barely felt it. All I felt was the heat of Marcus's gaze on my back, the weight of his voice still echoing in my ears. I'd walked away from him once before, in the courtroom, and I'd thought that was the hardest thing I'd ever have to do. I'd been wrong. Walking away from him now, knowing he was alive, knowing he'd been watching me, knowing he'd orchestrated this entire twisted performance, felt like tearing out a part of myself that I'd thought had already died. "Elena, wait." His footsteps were loud on the cobblestones, closing the distance between us.
"Please."
"Just give me 5 minutes." I stopped. Not because I wanted to, but because my legs had given out, my body rebelling against the sheer force of everything I was feeling. I turned slowly, my hands shaking at my sides. 5 minutes, I said, my voice flat. "Starting now." He closed the gap between us, his face a mask of desperation. Up close, I could see the shadows under his eyes, the new lines around his mouth. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks.
"Good."
"I never meant for it to go this far," he said, his voice low and urgent. "The affair, the embezzlement, the fake death. It all spiraled out of control, and I didn't know how to stop it." "You didn't want to stop it," I corrected. "There's a difference." He flinched, but he didn't argue. "You're right. I didn't. I was scared. I was so scared of losing everything I'd built that I couldn't see what I was really losing. I couldn't see you." "Don't," I said, holding up a hand. "Don't you dare pretend this was about me. This was about your ego, your greed, your inability to accept that I was just as responsible for our success as you were." He opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off. "You know what I remember? I remember staying up until 3 a.m. with you, going over spreadsheets. I remember making cold calls while you were in meetings, landing clients you couldn't close. I remember building Empire Holdings from the ground up while you took all the credit. And I didn't care, Marcus. I didn't care because I loved you, and I thought you loved me too." "I did love you," he said, his voice cracking. "I still do." I laughed, a hollow, broken sound. You don't love me. You don't even know what love is. You love power. You love control. And when you realized I wasn't going to give you either of those things, you decided to destroy me. He reached for me, his fingers brushing against my arm, and I jerked away like I'd been burned. Don't touch me. Don't ever touch me again. He stepped back, his hands raised in surrender. Okay.
Okay.
I won't. Just let me explain about Chloe. What about her? She was never part of the plan. Not really. I met her at a conference and she was interested in me.
Flattered me.
Made me feel like I was still the man I used to be. And I was weak, Elena.
So weak.
I let her in, and she saw everything. The cracks in our marriage, the strain in our business. She exploited it. That doesn't excuse what you did. I know it doesn't. But she was the one who came up with the idea, the embezzlement,
The forgery.
the plan to have you declared incompetent. I went along with it because I didn't know how to stop. I stared at him, my mind reeling. He was trying to shift the blame, to make himself look like a victim. And maybe part of what he was saying was true. Maybe Chloe had been the architect of the plan, but he'd been the one to execute it. He'd been the one to sign the documents, to freeze the accounts, to stand by while his mistress destroyed our life. I don't care who came up with the idea, I said. You did it. You went along with it. And now you're going to pay for it. His face went pale. What are you going to do? I'm going to take everything from you. Every single thing you tried to take from me. I'm going to expose the embezzlement, the fraud, the fake death. I'm going to make sure you never see a penny of the money you stole. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who you really are. Elena, please. I'm begging you. Don't do this. I'll give you everything. I'll sign over the rest of my shares. I'll disappear. I'll do whatever you want. Just please don't destroy me. Too late, I said, and I felt a cold smile spreading across my face. You already destroyed yourself. I'm just cleaning up the mess. I turned and walked away, my heart pounding in my ears. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I looked back, I might lose my nerve. I might let him see the tears that were threatening to spill down my cheeks that I made it back to the motel without falling apart. It was only when I closed the door of my room that I let myself break. I slid down the wall, my knees giving out, and I buried my face in my hands. The tears came then, hot and fast and unstoppable. I cried for the marriage I'd lost, the man I'd loved, the future that had been stolen from me. I cried until there was nothing left, until I was hollow and empty and numb. When I finally looked up, David was standing in the doorway, his face etched with concern. He'd heard me, of course. He'd been listening, waiting to see if I needed him. Are you okay? He asked, his voice gentle. No, I said, and I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. But I will be. He sat down on the edge of the bed, his hands folded in his lap. What did he say? He tried to blame Chloe. He tried to make me feel sorry for him. And for a second I almost did. I almost believed him. But you didn't.
No.
I remembered who he really is.
Who he's always been.
And I realized that I don't need his apologies. I don't need his explanations. I need justice. David nodded slowly. Then we'll get you justice. But first, we need to figure out our next move. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the gray sky. He's scared, I said. He knows I have the evidence. He knows I can destroy him. And he knows I will if he gives me any reason to. So what's the plan? The plan is to go back to the city. I'm going to file a motion to freeze his assets. I'm going to contact the FBI about the fraud and the embezzlement. And I'm going to make sure he never gets the chance to hurt anyone ever again. David stood and placed a hand on my shoulder. That's my girl. I didn't smile. I couldn't. But I felt something shift inside me, something that might have been strength. Or maybe just the beginning of it. We packed our bags and left Havenport that afternoon, the town shrinking in the rearview mirror as we drove away. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Marcus was a chapter of my life that was finally closing, and I was ready to turn the page. The drive back was quieter than the drive up, but more peaceful somehow. The weight that had been pressing on my chest for months had started to lift, replaced by a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in a long time. My phone buzzed as we crossed the city line. I looked down at the screen, expecting another message from Marcus or Chloe. But it wasn't them. It was a number I didn't recognize, with a message that sent my heart racing. I know what you're planning. And I want to help. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Who could it be? Another private investigator, a journalist, someone who knew Marcus and wanted to see him fall. I typed out a response. Who is this? The reply came almost instantly. Someone who's been watching you. Someone who wants to see you win. Meet me at the Old Mill Diner on 4th Street. Tomorrow at 11. I showed the messages to David, who read them with a frown. Could be a trap. Could be someone trying to get information out of you. It could also be someone who actually wants to help. Someone who has information I need. David shook his head. It's too risky. We don't know who this person is, or what they want. I know, I said. But I have to take the chance. If there's even a small possibility that this person can help me bring Marcus down, I have to try. David didn't argue. He just sighed and leaned back in his seat. You're impossible, you know that. I've been told. The next morning, I arrived at the Old Mill Diner at exactly 11. It was a small, old-fashioned place, with red vinyl booths and a jukebox that played oldies. The smell of coffee and bacon hung in the air, and for a moment, I felt almost peaceful. I sat down in a booth near the back and waited. 10 minutes passed. 15. I was beginning to think I'd been stood up when the door opened and a woman walked in. She was tall and blonde, with sharp features and intelligent eyes. She was wearing a simple black dress and carrying a leather briefcase. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. She walked straight to my booth and slid in across from me. Elena Sterling, she said, her voice low and professional. I'm sorry I'm late. I had to make sure I wasn't followed. Who are you? I asked, my voice wary. My name is Natalie. I used to work for Marcus. I was his accountant for 3 years, until I saw what he was doing and decided I couldn't be a part of it anymore. I stared at her, my heart pounding. You know about the embezzlement. I know everything. The offshore accounts, the forged financials, the fake death. I helped him set some of it up before I realized what I was doing. And I have the evidence to prove it. I leaned forward, my hands gripping the edge of the table. Why are you telling me this? Why now? Because I'm tired of looking over my shoulder. I'm tired of being scared. And I'm tired of letting a man like Marcus Sterling get away with everything. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. This is everything. Every account, every transaction, every lie. I've been holding on to it for months, waiting for the right moment to give it to someone who could use it. I took the folder, my hands shaking. This is incredible. This is everything I need to take him down. I know, Natalie said. That's why I gave it to you. Thank you, I said, and I meant it. You have no idea what this means to me. She smiled, a small, sad smile. I think I do. I was where you were once, and I know how it feels to want justice. I hope you get it, Elena. I really do. She stood and walked out of the diner, leaving me alone with the folder and a sense of hope I hadn't felt in a long time. I opened the folder and started to read. Page after page of evidence, each one damning, each one a nail in Marcus's coffin. I felt the fear and doubt that had been plaguing me start to fade away. I had him. I finally had him. I closed the folder and left the diner, my steps lighter than they'd been in months. I had a plan. I had a purpose. And for the first time since my world had fallen apart, I felt like I was in control. The diner door swung shut behind Natalie, and I sat there for a long moment, the folder heavy in my hands. The smell of stale coffee and frying bacon faded into the background as I flipped through the first few pages. Bank statements, wire transfer receipts, email correspondence between Marcus and his offshore contacts. It was all there, every single piece of evidence I needed to bury him. My phone buzzed, and I glanced down at the screen. It was David. Did she show? His voice was tense, clipped. She showed. And she delivered. I paused, my thumb tracing the edge of the folder. David, this is everything. Every account, every transaction, every lie. She gave me the whole thing. There was a beat of silence on the other end. Elena, that's incredible. But it's also dangerous. If Marcus finds out you have this, he'll do anything to get it back. Then we make sure he doesn't find out. Not until it's too late. I slipped the folder into my bag and stood, leaving a 20 on the table for the coffee I hadn't touched. The morning sun was bright and unforgiving as I stepped outside, and I squinted against the glare. My car was parked just down the street, and I walked toward it with a steady, measured pace, fighting the urge to glance over my shoulder. I was halfway to the car when I heard it. Footsteps. Fast, uneven, closing the distance between us. Elena. I turned, and my heart dropped into my stomach. Chloe stood on the sidewalk, her arms still in a sling, her face bruised and pale beneath a layer of expensive makeup. She looked like a ghost, hollow and desperate, her eyes burning with a fury that made my skin crawl. "Chloe," I said, my voice flat. "What are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing." She stepped closer, her heels clicking on the pavement. "I saw you leave the diner. I saw the folder. You've been busy, haven't you?" I clutched my bag tighter. "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me." Her voice was sharp, jagged. "I know you've been digging. I know you hired a private investigator. I know you went to Havenport. I know everything." "How?" "Because Marcus told me. He called me last night, crying like a child, begging me to help him. And I realized then that he was always going to be a coward. He was never going to stand up for himself. He was never going to protect me." She laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "I gave up everything for that man. Everything. And he couldn't even keep his mouth shut when it mattered." I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. She wasn't here to threaten me. She was here to confess. "I'm tired, Elena," she continued, her voice softening. "I'm so tired of running. I'm tired of lying. I'm tired of being afraid." She looked down at her feet, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I didn't know about the fake death. Not at first. I thought he was really dead. I thought I was alone. But you figured it out. Eventually. He couldn't stay away. He kept calling, kept sending messages, kept promising me a future. And I believed him. I believed him because I had nothing else to believe in." She looked up, her eyes wet with tears. "I was stupid. I was so stupid. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her that I understood what it was like to be manipulated by Marcus. But another part of me, the part that had been burned and betrayed and broken, wanted to watch her suffer. "I'm not here to fight you," she said, as if reading my thoughts. "I'm here to help you." "Help me?" I laughed, a short, incredulous sound. "You helped Marcus destroy me. You helped him steal from me. You helped him try to take everything I built. And now you want to help me. I know it doesn't make sense. I know you have no reason to trust me. But I have information you need. Information about his new identity, his new accounts, the people he's working with." I studied her face, searching for the lie. But all I saw was exhaustion. And something that looked almost like remorse. "Why?" I asked. "Why would you help me after everything?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then, in a voice so soft I almost missed it, she said, "Because I'm pregnant." The words hit me like a physical blow. I staggered back a step, my hand gripping the car door for support. "You're what?" "Pregnant. Marcus's baby." She placed her free hand on her stomach, and I saw the faint swell beneath her coat. "I found out the day after the accident. I thought he was dead. I thought I was going to raise this child alone. And then I found out he was alive, and I thought maybe we could make it work. Maybe we could be a family. But you can't."
No.
Her voice cracked. "I can't. Because he doesn't want a family. He wants a convenient pawn. Someone he can use and discard when she's no longer useful.
Just like he did with you."
Just like he's doing with me." I felt a surge of something I couldn't name. Pity, maybe. Or recognition. I'd been where she was, trapped in Marcus's web of lies and manipulation. And I'd gotten out. Barely. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice steady. "I want you to promise me something." She stepped closer, her eyes boring into mine. "When you take him down, I want you to make sure he can't hurt anyone else.
Not me.
Not this baby. Not anyone. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw the fear beneath the bravado. She wasn't just trying to save herself. She was trying to save her child. Okay, I said. I promise. She let out a shaky breath, and for a moment, she looked almost relieved. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a small USB drive. This has everything you need. His new bank accounts, his fake passport, the names of the people who helped him fake his death. It's all there. I took the drive, my fingers brushing against hers. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just make sure it's worth it. She turned to walk away, then paused. Elena, yes, I'm sorry. For everything.
For what I did to you.
For what I let him do to me. I'm so sorry. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Because for the first time, looking at Chloe, I didn't see the woman who destroyed my marriage. I saw someone who'd been just as broken as I was. She walked away, disappearing around the corner, and I stood there for a long moment, the USB drive clutched in my hand. Then I got into my car and drove back to the penthouse, my mind racing with all the things I needed to do. David was waiting for me when I arrived, his face pale with worry. I've been calling you for an hour. Where have you been? I ran into Chloe, I said, holding up the drive. She gave me this. It's everything. His new identity, his new accounts, the people who helped him. David stared at me, his mouth hanging open. Chloe, she gave you this. It's a long story. The short version is, she's pregnant, and she's finally realized Marcus doesn't care about her. She wants to make sure he can't hurt anyone else. David shook his head, a low whistle escaping his lips. This is either the best thing that's ever happened to you, or the worst trap I've ever seen. I know, I said. But I don't have a choice. I have to trust it. We spent the next hour going through the contents of the drive, cross-referencing them with the evidence I already had. Everything matched. The accounts, the aliases, the timeline of his escape. It was all there, laid out in pristine, damning detail. We have enough to go to the authorities, David said, his voice tinged with awe. We can have him arrested tonight. I nodded slowly, but something was nagging at me. Something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Chloe said something else. She said Marcus called her last night. That he was scared. That he knew we were closing in on him. David frowned. That means he knows we're coming. It also means he's desperate. And desperate people do desperate things. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Marcus was hiding. And he knew exactly where I was. We need to move fast, I said, turning back to David. If he's scared, he's going to run. And if he runs, we might never catch him. I'll make the calls. The FBI. The DA. Everyone we need. David was already on his phone, his fingers flying across the screen. We'll have a warrant by the end of the day. But I wasn't listening. I was thinking about Marcus, about the way he'd looked at me on the waterfront. Scared, desperate, broken. And I realized, with a sudden clarity that made my chest ache, that I didn't want to destroy him. I just wanted to be free of him. David, I said, my voice quiet. He looked up from his phone. What? I want to talk to him. Before they arrest him. I want to see him one last time. David's face went pale. Elena, that's a terrible idea. He's dangerous. I know what he is. But I need to do this. For myself. I need to close this chapter once and for all. David opened his mouth to argue, but he must have seen something in my eyes, because he just sighed and nodded.
Fine.
But I'm coming with you. And if anything goes wrong, we're out of there.
No arguments.
I nodded, a small smile tugging at my lips.
No arguments.
An hour later, we were on the road again, driving toward the address Chloe had given me. It was a small house on the outskirts of the city, a rental property Marcus had been using to lie low. The neighborhood was quiet, suburban, the kind of place where people didn't ask questions. David pulled up across the street and parked. Are you sure about this? No, I said, my hand on the door handle. But I'm doing it anyway. I crossed the street and walked up the driveway, my heart pounding in my chest. The front door was unlocked, and I pushed it open, stepping into the dim, silent house. "Marcus," I called out. "I know you're here." There was a rustling from the next room, and then he appeared in the doorway. He looked terrible, his clothes rumpled, his face haggard, his eyes wild with fear. "Elena," he said, his voice hoarse. "What are you doing here?" "I came to say goodbye," I said. "One last time." He stared at me, his expression unreadable. Then he laughed, a broken, bitter sound. "You came to gloat. To watch me fall."
No.
"I came to tell you that I'm done. I'm done fighting you. I'm done hating you. I'm just done." He took a step toward me, his hands outstretched. "Elena, please. I can change. I can be the man you wanted me to be. Just give me a chance." "It's too late for that," I said, my voice steady. "It's been too late for a long time." I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. "Elena, wait. I have something to tell you. Something you need to know." I paused, my hand on the doorframe. What? It was never about the money. Or the company. Or Chloe. It was about you.
It was always about you.
I was so afraid of losing you that I pushed you away. I destroyed everything because I couldn't face the truth. What truth? That I loved you. And I didn't know how to stop. I turned to look at him, and for a moment, I saw the man I'd married. The man I'd loved. But the sight of him, broken and desperate, only made me angrier. "I don't believe you," I said. "I don't believe anything you say anymore." And with that, I walked out of the house and didn't look back. The door clicked shut behind me, and I stood on the front porch of the tiny rental house, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The afternoon sun was warm on my face, but I felt cold all the way through. Marcus's words echoed in my head, twisting and turning like a knife I couldn't pull out. Asterisk, I loved you. And I didn't know how to stop. Asterisk, I wanted to believe him. Some small, broken part of me still wanted to believe that the man I'd married was still in there somewhere, buried beneath the lies and the greed and the betrayal. But I knew better. I'd known better for a long time. David was waiting in the car, his face tight with worry. He started to get out when he saw me, but I waved him back. I needed a moment. Just one moment to breathe. I walked down the driveway, my heels clicking on the cracked concrete, and I made it to the sidewalk before I heard the front door open behind me. "Elena." His voice was raw, desperate. I kept walking. "Please. Just stop. Just for a second." I stopped. I didn't turn around. "I know you don't believe me," he said, his voice closer now. "I know I don't deserve your trust. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything I did to you." I turned slowly, and he was standing at the edge of the driveway, his hands in his pockets, his shoulders hunched. He looked smaller than I remembered, diminished somehow, like the weight of his lies had finally crushed him. "You're sorry," I repeated, and my voice was flat. "You're sorry. That's supposed to fix everything." "No. Nothing can fix what I did." But I wanted to say it anyway. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You know what I find funny? Marcus, you never apologized before. Not once.
Not when I found out about the affair.
Not when you froze our accounts. Not when you tried to have me declared incompetent. You only apologize when you've been caught. When you have nothing left to lose." He flinched, but he didn't look away. "You're right. I was a coward. I was a coward then, and I'm a coward now. But I'm trying. I'm trying to be better." Too little. Too late. I turned to walk away, but his voice stopped me again.
"Elena."
"The baby. Chloe's baby. It's not mine." I froze. Slowly, I turned back to face him. "What? It's not mine," he repeated, and his voice cracked on the words. "I found out a few weeks ago. I had a DNA test done without her knowing. The child isn't mine." I stared at him, my mind reeling. "But she told me."
"She lied."
"She's been lying to both of us. The pregnancy is real, but I'm not the father. She used it to manipulate me, to keep me close. And I let her, because I was too afraid to lose anyone else." I felt the world tilt beneath my feet. Chloe's tearful confession. Her desperate plea for help. The USB drive she'd handed me with such dramatic urgency. It had all been a performance. Another act in the endless theater of lies that surrounded Marcus. "You're telling me the truth?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm telling you the truth. I don't have anything left to gain by lying to you." I studied his face, searching for the familiar signs of deception. But all I saw was exhaustion, and something that looked almost like relief. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Why now?" "Because I'm tired of being used. By Chloe. By everyone. I've spent the last 2 years letting people manipulate me, and I'm done." He took a step closer, his eyes pleading. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I'm not asking for it. I'm just asking you to believe me. Just this once." I didn't answer. I couldn't. The words had lodged in my throat like stones. "I'm going to turn myself in," he said, and his voice was quiet. "I'm going to confess to everything. The embezzlement. The fraud. The fake death. I'm going to make it right." "Make it right?" I laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "You can't make it right, Marcus. You can't undo what you did. You can't take back the years you stole from me." "I know,
But I can try.
for what it's worth." He turned and walked back into the house, and I stood there, frozen, watching him disappear into the shadows. The door clicked shut and I was alone. I walked back to the car in a daze, my mind spinning with everything he'd told me. Chloe's lies. The DNA test. The confession he'd promised. David opened the door for me, his face etched with concern. "What happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I don't know what I've seen," I said, sliding into the passenger seat. "But I think I just saw the truth. For the first time in a long time." We drove back to the city in silence, the miles passing in a blur. I stared out the window, watching the landscape change from suburban quiet to urban chaos, and I tried to make sense of everything that had happened. Chloe had lied. She'd used her pregnancy as a weapon, a tool to manipulate Marcus, and to get close to me. And I'd fallen for it. I'd believed her tears, her apologies, her desperate plea for help. I'd trusted her. And maybe that was the worst part. Not that she'd lied, but that I'd let myself be fooled again. I'd spent months building walls, protecting myself from the lies and the betrayal. And in one moment of weakness, I'd let someone tear them down. I thought about the USB drive she'd given me. The one she'd promised contained everything I needed to destroy Marcus. If the pregnancy was a lie, what else was a lie? The evidence, the accounts, the names of his accomplices. I reached into my bag and pulled out the drive, turning it over in my hands. It felt heavier than it should, weighed down by the possibility that it was nothing but another deception. "David," I said, my voice quiet, "I need you to look into something." "What?" "Chloe's pregnancy. I need you to find out if she's really pregnant, and if so, who the father is." David glanced at me, his eyebrows raised. "Why would Marcus tell you?" He said it's not his. He said he had a DNA test done without her knowing. "And you believe him?" I hesitated. "I don't know, but I need to find out the truth. If she's been lying about this, she's been lying about everything." David nodded slowly. "I'll make some calls. See what I can find out." We pulled up to the penthouse, and I climbed out of the car, the USB drive still clutched in my hand. I rode the elevator up to my floor in a daze, my mind still spinning with everything I'd learned. The penthouse was dark when I walked in, and I didn't bother turning on the lights. I just walked to the window and looked out at the city, my reflection a ghost in the glass. I thought about Marcus, about the man he used to be, the man who'd stayed up late with me, dreaming about the future we'd build together. The man who'd held my hand during the worst moments of my life. The man I'd loved. And I thought about the man he'd become. The liar. The cheat. The coward who'd tried to destroy me. I didn't know which one was real anymore. Maybe they both were. Maybe the man I'd loved and the man I'd hated were the same person, just different sides of the same broken coin. My phone buzzed, and I looked down to see a message from an unknown number. Asterisk, I know what you're thinking. Don't do anything stupid. I'm watching you. Asterisk, I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. It had to be Chloe. No one else would have known what was going through my head. I typed out a response. Who is this? The reply came instantly. Asterisk, you know who it is. And you know what I'm capable of. Stay out of my way, or I'll make you regret it. I didn't respond. I just deleted the message and blocked the number. I was done letting her intimidate me. She could threaten me all she wanted. I wasn't going to back down. But the fear was there, lurking beneath the surface. She was watching me. She was always watching me. Did I grab my keys and walk to the door? I needed to get out of the penthouse, to clear my head, to figure out my next move. I was halfway to the elevator when I heard it. A soft click like a lock being turned. I froze, my heart pounding in my ears. Someone was in the apartment. I turned slowly, my eyes scanning the darkness. And then I saw her, Chloe, standing in the doorway of my bedroom, a faint smile on her lips. "Hello, Elena," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "I was wondering when you'd notice me." I stared at her, my mind racing. "What are you doing here? I came to make a deal." She walked toward me, her heels clicking on the marble floor. "You have something I want, and I have something you want. I think we can help each other." "I have nothing you want," I said, my voice cold. She laughed, a soft musical sound. "Oh, you have plenty. The evidence, the accounts, the USB drive I gave you. I need all of it back." "Why, so you can destroy it? So I can destroy Marcus," she corrected, her smile fading. "You see, I've been playing a long game. A very long game. And I'm not going to let you ruin it." I stared at her, my mind spinning. "You've been playing a game. This whole time." "Of course I have. Do you think I actually cared about Marcus? Do you think I was in love with him?" She laughed again, the sound cold and sharp. "He was a means to an end, just like you were." "What end? Freedom?" She stepped closer, her eyes glittering with a dangerous light. "I was trapped in a relationship I didn't want, with a man I didn't love. And I was willing to do whatever it took to get out, even if it meant destroying you." I felt the air leave my lungs. "You wanted to destroy me. I wanted to destroy Marcus. You were just collateral damage." She shrugged, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "But now I've changed my mind. I've realized that you're the only one who can help me finish this. So I'm offering you a deal." "What kind of deal?" "You give me the evidence. I take care of Marcus. And you get to walk away clean." I stared at her, my heart pounding. "You want me to help you destroy Marcus? I want you to help me finish what I started." "Yes." "And if I say no," her smile widened, "then I'll make sure you regret it. I'll release everything I have on you. Every secret, every lie, every moment of weakness. I'll make sure you lose everything." I felt the color drain from my face. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" She reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. "Take a look. And then tell me if you think I'm bluffing." I took the envelope, my hands shaking, and opened it. Inside was a series of photographs.
Me, at the diner.
Me, at the private investigator's office. Me in Havenport, standing on the waterfront. I looked up at her, my blood running cold. "You've been following me for months." She smiled, a predator's smile. "I know everything, Elena. Every move you've made. Every person you've talked to. Every secret you've tried to hide." I felt the walls closing in around me. She'd been playing me from the start. Marcus was just a pawn. I was just a pawn. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Everything," she said. "And I'm going to get it, one way or another." She took a step toward me, and I took a step back. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear her next words. "Make your choice, Elena. Help me or lose everything." I looked at the photographs in my hand, then at her smiling face. And I realized, with a sudden clarity that made my stomach drop, that I was trapped by a woman who'd been playing me from the start. Trapped by the lies and the betrayal and the fear, but I wasn't going to give up.
"Not now."
"Not ever. All right," I said, my voice steady. "I'll help you." Chloe's smile widened. "I knew you'd see things my way." She turned to leave, but I stopped her with a single word. "Chloe." She looked back, her eyes curious. "You've made a mistake," I said, my voice cold. "You think you've won, but you've just made me your enemy. And I promise you, that's a mistake you'll regret." She laughed, a bright, careless sound. I don't think so. And then she was gone, disappearing into the elevator like a ghost. I stood alone in the penthouse, the photographs clutched in my hands, and I felt something shift inside me. The fear was still there, lurking beneath the surface. But there was something else, too. Something stronger. Determination. I was going to take her down. And I was going to make sure she never hurt anyone again. I sat in the dark for a long time after Chloe left. The photographs spread across the coffee table like evidence of a crime I hadn't committed. She'd been watching me for months, cataloging my every move, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And she'd chosen tonight, but she'd made one mistake. She'd show me her hand. She'd let me know exactly how deep her game went, and in doing so, she'd given me the one thing I needed most, a target. I picked up my phone and called David. I need you to do something for me, I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. I need you to find out everything there is to know about Chloe. Her past, her family, her finances. I need to know who she really is. Elena, it's almost midnight. Please, David. This is important. She's been playing us both. The pregnancy, the evidence, the threats. It's all been a setup. And I need to know what she's really after. There was a pause on the other end. Then, I'll make some calls. But Elena, if she's as dangerous as you think she is, you need to be careful. She's not going to go down without a fight. I know, I said. Neither am I. I hung up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. Somewhere out there, Chloe was celebrating her victory, convinced she'd outmaneuvered me. She had no idea that I was already planning my countermove. The next morning, David called with the information I'd been waiting for. Chloe's real name is Chloe Bennett, he said, his voice tight. She was born in a small town in Ohio. Her mother died when she was young, and her father was a con artist who spent most of her childhood in prison. She's been running scams since she was a teenager.
A con artist, he repeated.
That explains a lot. There's more. She's been linked to several high-profile fraud cases over the years, but she's always managed to slip away before the authorities could catch her. She's good at disappearing, good at reinventing herself. And Marcus was a mark at first, but somewhere along the way, she got too close. She started to believe her own lies. She started to think she could have it all. The money, the power, the man. I felt a chill run down my spine. She wasn't just a con artist. She was a predator, circling her prey until the perfect moment to strike. I need to see her, I said. I need to confront her. Elena, that's exactly what she wants. She's trying to provoke you. Don't give her the satisfaction. She's not going to get satisfaction. She's going to get a wake-up call. I hung up and grabbed my keys. I knew where Chloe would be. The same diner where we'd met. The same booth where she'd handed me the USB drive and played me for a fool. She was sitting in the corner when I walked in, a cup of coffee in front of her, a satisfied smile on her face. She looked up as I approached, and her smile widened. I was wondering when you'd show up, she said. I was starting to think you'd lost your nerve. I don't lose my nerve, I said, sliding into the booth across from her. I just pick my moments. I'm sure you do. She took a sip of her coffee, her eyes never leaving mine. So, have you decided to take my deal? I've decided something else, I said. I've decided to expose you. Every scam, every lie, every person you've hurt. I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who you really are. Her smile faltered, just for a moment. Then it was back, brighter than ever. You don't have the evidence to do that. I made sure of it. Maybe, but I have something better. I have the truth. She laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. The truth is a weapon, Elena. And I've been wielding it for years. You don't stand a chance against me. I don't need to stand a chance. I just need to be smarter than you. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small recorder, placing it on the table between us. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw real fear in them. What is that? She asked, her voice tight. Everything we've said since I sat down. Every word you've confessed. Every threat you've made. It's all on this recorder. She stared at the device, her face pale. You're bluffing. Am I? I pressed play, and her voice filled the diner. Asterisk, I've been playing a long game. A very long game. And I'm not going to let you ruin it. Asterisk, the color drained from her face. You little. Careful, I said, my voice calm. There are witnesses. And I have a feeling the police would be very interested in hearing what you have to say. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This isn't over. You hear me, this isn't over. It's over, I said, looking up at her. You just don't know it yet. She turned and fled, her heels clicking frantically on the linoleum floor. I watched her go, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace that I paid for my coffee and walked out of the diner, the recorder safely in my bag. The sun was warm on my face, and I took a deep breath, letting the clean air fill my lungs that I had won. Not because I was stronger or smarter than Chloe, but because I was finally ready to let go. Let go of the anger.
The pain.
The need for revenge. I drove back to the penthouse and called Marcus. He answered on the first ring. I'm ready to talk, I said. No lawyers.
No recordines.
Just the two of us. He was waiting for me at the house in Havenport, the same house where he'd confessed his sins. He looked older now, more tired, but there was a peace in his eyes that hadn't been there before. I've been thinking, he said, his voice quiet, about everything I did. The lies. The betrayals. The way I hurt you. I sat down across from him, my hands folded in my lap. I've been thinking too. And I've realized something. I don't hate you, Marcus. I used to. I spent so long hating you that I forgot what it felt like to be happy. I'm sorry, he said. I know those words don't mean much, but I mean them. I'm sorry for everything. I nodded slowly. I know. And I forgive you. He looked up, his eyes wide with surprise. You forgive me. I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve to let go. He started to cry then, silent tears streaming down his face. And I let him, because for the first time, I didn't feel the need to hold on to the anger anymore. I stood up to leave, but he stopped me with a single word.
Anna.
I turned. Thank you, he said, for everything. I smiled, a real smile. Goodbye, Marcus. I walked out of the house and didn't look back. Months later, I stood on the balcony of the penthouse, looking out at the city I'd built my life around. The sky was clear, the stars bright, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free. The phone buzzed in my pocket. It was David. Elena, I've got the final report. Chloe's been arrested. She's facing multiple charges, including fraud and conspiracy. She's not getting out anytime soon. Good, I said. Let her rot. How are you doing? He asked, his voice gentle. I'm doing, I said. I'm doing better than I thought I would. I hung up and looked out at the stars. The past was behind me now, a distant memory fading into the distance. And the future was bright, full of possibility, that I was free. Finally, completely, irrevocably free.